Radio VR. Press Review.
Allied military chiefs to discuss actions against Syria. Pollsters find out what people think about Snowden. Buying alcohol for cash may become illegal in Russia. A meeting of Allied military chiefs is scheduled in Jordan on Monday. Novoye Zvezda writes that top-ranking military officials of the U.S., U.K., and France will discuss the course of action to be taken as a response to the chemical attacks in Syria. The Daily reminds that according to a report published by Doctors Without Borders, around 3,600 Syrians were admitted to hospitals after an attack last Wednesday. 355 of them have passed away. At the same time, the organization emphasized that whether a chemical attack actually happened and, more importantly, who was behind it, cannot be proven at this point of time. Bashar al-Assad and insurgents both accuse the opposing side. The United States, however, treated the report as proof that the current Syrian regime deployed chemical weapons, the newspaper explains. Leading researcher of the International Security Center of the Institute of World Economy and International Relations, Vladimir Sotnikov, believes that the Syrian government is unlikely behind the chemical attack, saying doing so while UN inspectors were in the country would be illogical and downright suicidal, especially given that experts agree the Syrian army is on the verge of winning the military conflict. He suggested two possibilities: a third party such as radical Islamists, or a less likely one, Assad's commanders using chemical weapons out of their own volition. Public Opinion Foundation has polled Russians on their attitude towards Edward Snowden, a former NSA contractor who leaked confidential information regarding American surveillance programs, Kommersant reports. 48% of respondents approve of his actions, 30% do not think he did the right thing, and 22% are yet to make a decision. Another pollster, Vox Populi, analyzed social media. 70% of Russian social network users are neutral towards Snowden and his actions. 14% approve, and 16% disapprove of his leaks. The company looked through social media posts throughout the first 3 weeks of August and found almost 630,000 messages which mentioned Snowden. Most of the time it were American citizens who mentioned him, 40%. 9% of the messages were left by British citizens and 7% by Russians. Kirill Rodin, executive director of Vox Populi, explained, "The Snowden scandal is closer to home to Americans compared to Russians. The attitude towards him is not universally positive, but he is definitely not considered to be a public enemy." Russian State Duma deputies are considering banning alcohol sales for cash, as Vestia reports. Deputy Oleg Mikheyev from a Just Russia faction has drawn up a bill which limits sale of alcohol to bank card transactions. According to the lawmaker, the decision will increase control over alcohol market and make it harder to illegally sell to the underage. The memo attached to the bill explains that current measures taken by the government to reduce alcohol consumption, such as ban on night sales and increased punitive measures for selling to minors, are not very effective. Russia remains one of world leaders in terms of alcohol consumption per capita. Limiting sales to cashless transactions will prevent alcoholic drinks from being sold at small point of sales, the ones which most often break regulations. Minors and vulnerable population groups will not be able to procure alcohol anywhere. Criminal activities such as stealing money to feed drinking habits will also make no sense with the new system, the legislator hopes. While experts interviewed by the Daily praise the idea, most point out that Russia, by and large, is not ready to transfer to cashless payments, especially in rural areas.
headquarters. Radio VR, the voice of Russia.
I am Jay Johnson. This is Radio VR, and here are today's top stories. Anti-war crusade. Hysteria around the chemical attack in Syria must stop, Russia says. War intervention rumors are growing stronger. And eastern Russia, underwater. A flood of historical proportions has triggered a mass evacuation effort. And we'll take you there with our own team of reporters. And the west coast of America is on fire. Hundreds of firefighters have been deployed to battle the wildfires in western states of the U.S. And now for news.
Radio VR News.
This is Moscow. You're listening to the Voice of Russia World Service. Now the news, Red Boy John Robles. First, the main points. The Russian Federation has no evidence of a chemical weapons attack in Syria, said President Vladimir Putin. U.S. President Barack Obama will meet Russian President Vladimir Putin next week at the G20 summit. And Russian warships dock at a Venezuelan port for a visit. Those are the main points. Now the news in detail. The Russian Federation has no evidence of whether a chemical weapons attack had taken place in Syria or who is responsible. Russian President Vladimir Putin told British Prime Minister David Cameron in a telephone call arranged by the British side. The two leaders conducted an urgent telephone call on Monday afternoon regarding the Syrian crisis in the wake of a sniper attack on UN chemical weapons inspectors outside of Damascus. According to the Kremlin press service, the conversation focused on the situation in Syria in light of the chemical weapons reports. According to White House spokesman Jay Carney, President Barack Obama will meet President Vladimir Putin next week at the G20 summit in St. Petersburg. He did not stipulate whether they will hold an individual meeting. President Obama has been at odds with Russia over its decision to grant asylum to former U.S. spy agency contractor Edward Snowden. The United Nations said on Monday it was still possible for a United Nations team of chemical weapons inspectors to gather evidence necessary to come to conclusions about last week's alleged gas attack in the suburbs east of Damascus. Despite the passage of a number of days, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said that he was confident that the team will be able to obtain and analyze evidence relevant to its investigation of the August 21st incident. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov urged the international community to wait for the results of the UN investigation into the alleged use of those weapons. He said, and I quote, "Suffice it to take a look at websites. Many of them provide information and photos of the shell that was exploded and describe the substance it contained. Experts say these videos and images raise many questions. When they show images of dozens of dead children, the question arises, why and how did they all happen to be in the same place? At the same time, no one has explained that." He also mentioned the symptoms that were described in the videos that do not coincide with symptoms that are characteristic of poisoning with sarin gas or other chemical agents. Mr. Lavrov also mentioned intercepted email messages that were posted on the internet which indicated that certain chemical agents had been brought in for the rebels from abroad. A Russian naval task force led by the Moskva missile cruiser arrived Monday on a visit to the Venezuelan port of La Guaira. Local media reported the Moskva, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, is accompanied by the Udaloy-class destroyer Vice Admiral Kulakov from the Northern Fleet and the Ivan Bubnov tanker. During the visit, which will last until August 29th, the crews of the Russian warships are expected to meet with their Venezuelan colleagues and bestow honors to former President Hugo Chavez. On Monday, the U.S. State Department denied reports that U.S. brokered peace talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians had been canceled following clashes in the West Bank. State Department spokeswoman Mary Harf gave assurances that no meetings have been canceled and that the parties are engaged in serious and, as she said, sustained negotiations. That was the news from Moscow, read by John Robles. Thanks for listening. I'm just back from vacation, and as always, I wish you all the best, wherever in the world you may be. Don't forget to visit our website. We have a new web address. It's voiceofrussia.com.
Now we have a business update with Pavel.
Thanks, Jay. Uralkali CEO has been detained in Belarus. ING has sold Korean life insurance unit for almost $2 billion, and Sinovac profit has jumped by 25%. Uralkali Chief Executive Officer Vladislav Baumgartner